I want to spend some time talking about assignment 3 that is due at the end of March. When you look at this, you are going to need to make some assumptions about the cost of things and about what the inflation rate might be and what increase in rent you might be able to get from making some improvements to property. But how I want you to handle this assignment is to start with the numbers that you came up with for the second assignment, and start with that premise that that is your annual operating budget. And one of the things you're going to do is forecast this out over a 5-year period. I put some sample worksheets up within the assignment so you can see what they might look like. You can add as many lines as you want. If the worksheet example does not have a line for all of the expenses, so for example, you can add lines. You can combine expenses, but I would not combine too many of them because sometimes they end up not fitting together and it's easier to make a mistake. What I want you to do is pick an inflation rate and assume that everything is going to cost a little bit more every year. So say 2 or 3% or 1%, whatever you pick is fine with me, but you need to pick one and just kind of stick with it. And so, for example, if you have $100 in utilities this year and you pick 2%, that means year 2 utilities you will estimate to be $102. Then the next year you'll add 2% on top of the $102. So it will be like $104.40 or something like that. I don't know exactly what it comes out to. And you can round up. You don't need to give me the cents. You can use whole numbers and round. Again, it's not that I care whether you guess right about the inflation rate. It's that I see you know how to do these calculations and fill out these worksheets, because these are things you're going to run into when you are out in the business world, and it's important for you to understand how they're calculated. And who knows, you might need to fill one out sometime. The next thing I want you to do is to figure out, with the property that you have, what would you do to fix it up and make it more desirable if you were king of the forest? Pick one thing. Doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a little thing, but it should be some improvement to the property that will allow you, in theory, to charge more rent. And then you are going to guess. Again, a wag is fine with me. I don't need you to research the cost of things. I don't need you to get bids. And you may not even have any idea, because maybe you've never done any home improvements and you don't know. But it's okay. You can cruise around the internet a little bit, and I put some links up for you to get an idea about how long things last. So maybe the thing that you will choose is, if you have those older apartments, maybe you'll choose to replace the appliances. So if you know how many apartments there are and you know how many stoves and refrigerators you need, you can get a general idea of a cost of some basic stoves and refrigerators, and maybe add a little bit for installation unless you're going to do it yourself, and the haul away of the old stuff, and figure out how much that's going to cost you. And then you figure out what year you're going to do it in, or if you're going to spread it out over the 5 years, maybe you'll do so many units every year. And then you'll figure out if you can increase the rent. And if you can increase the rent because of that improvement, there's a worksheet for you to show me that too. The idea is that you want to get expenses down and rents as competitive as you possibly can. When you're doing your inflation calculations, you probably also want to include an inflation factor for rent, because you're going to probably want to raise the rent every year. And so you're going to need to give me a number for that. And tell me how you got that number. If it's a wag, that's great. I don't need to know how you got there. I just need to know that you thought about it and you're able to explain your answer to me, how you arrived at it. Now, I want you to know that this is not going to take an hour. You're going to need to start it a little bit earlier. If you have any questions or you get stuck, please let me know before the day it's due, because I don't always get to my emails through the day, and I want to be able to help you and answer your questions. If you had problems with the financial part of assignment 2 and you haven't gone through and made those corrections and are comfortable that you know how to do those, now is the time to be figuring that out too, because I really want you to be successful. And since assignment 3 starts with the numbers from assignment 2, I need to know that you have got that down pat. And then the more you do that, the easier it will get. It's a little scary, but I know you can do it. And if you've never been a homeowner, if you've been a homeowner or you have investment properties that you manage, you already probably have a really good idea about some of this stuff. But one of the things that Steve Fender talked about was that, because he has so many doors under management, that he can go out and negotiate with maintenance contractors and things and get a better price because he has volume. And one of the things that we talk about in Chapter 9 is maintenance of properties and how you go about that. Some of you gave some really good answers on your discussion board posts about how you would handle a tenant who had a maintenance request and some processes that you would implement. And those were great suggestions. I'm really glad to see you thinking. Chapter 9 talks a little bit about how you handle those kind of maintenance requests. And I guess probably the most important thing to remember on that is if you're dealing with something that requires a licensed person like an electrician or a plumber, to make sure the person you get is licensed, because that can get you and the person in trouble, and maybe you'll get a shoddy job. You might have to pull permits, it might cost you a little bit extra, take you a little bit longer to get the work done. But if you just hire Joe Handyman off of the sign stuck in the corner by the stoplight on those little wire stakes, that he knows how to do everything, you're going to get what you pay for. So you might want to think about that and make sure you get someone who's licensed if you need that kind of work done. If you're handy and you want to do it yourself, yay, you get to save some money. But again, make sure you know how to do it yourself, because you have health safety issues involved and you don't want somebody to come after you. The most important thing, I think that the other most important thing I would stress about Chapter 9 is they talk about staffing, and this would also go with hiring contractors. You might choose to have people on staff if you have a lot of properties to manage, or you might choose to contract out all of your work that needs to be done, like maintenance and custodial and that sort of thing. The IRS is very particular, because a lot of times people want to hire somebody and call them a contractor so they don't have to take taxes out of their pay and just write them a check for a flat amount like $20 an hour. So you worked 30 hours and you get a check for $600 and you think bada bing, bada boom, I'm done. I don't have to do anything else and I can take that off on my taxes. Well, there are IRS requirements about how you pay people. And they're very much of late, this last year or two, on to the notion that people are calling employees independent contractors to avoid paying those payroll taxes. They are really scrutinizing that. So you want to be careful. The book talks about some tests that you can tell whether the person really is technically an employee. It has to do with, do you provide the tools? Do you provide the place to work? Do you give the hours of work that they have to work? Do you direct their work? Do you tell them how to do their job? Do they work for other people besides you? These are all tests that the IRS will look at when they're coming around to see if you should have been paying payroll taxes on somebody. So you want to be careful about that. If you're only hiring somebody part-time and, maybe a high school student after school or whatever, it's probably an employee. But if you're hiring a plumber or a licensed electrician or somebody who's got his own contracting business, then you're probably got a contractor. That's just something to be really, really careful about. And one of your quiz questions for this time does go into that into a little bit more detail, because I'm trying to give you some little tricks and traps that get people sometimes that seem sort of innocuous. But most of you are probably not going to be in the business of hiring a lot of employees, but you do need to know what to look for when you're hiring a contractor. So if you're like me in doing some home renovations right now, there's nothing more frustrating than calling somebody like a plumber and they never call you back. Maybe they're too busy to do the job, but they don't bother to tell you that. And so, there's maddening things that go along with hiring people, or they don't show up when they say they're going to, or they don't do a great job, and then they still want to be paid. And so there are all kinds of things that go into that. So it's always good to make sure you're hiring somebody reputable to do work on your property, and that you're being very astute as a business person. I know that many of you live in small communities where you probably know most of the contractors and maybe are friends or family members with them, and that comes with its own set of perils. I'm not going to address that today, but I'm sure if some of you may have had good fortune with that and some of you not so good, but just always to be on the alert, I guess, would be my advice, and get things in writing. Again, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. If you don't take away one more thing from this course, I hope I can impress upon you the concept of, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So you want to get contracts with people, and you want to make sure you document your tenants' maintenance requests. And the other thing is that we're still going to keep coming back to the Americans with Disabilities Act and the fair housing laws. There's a module in your module section that has resources for fair housing and ADA. And those are things that you are going to need to know about when you do maintenance work on your properties, and who's entitled to ask for maintenance work, and what do you have to legally require as the owner or manager of the property. What can the tenant do for him or herself, and what's a reasonable, what do you have to do to comply with the law? So those are some resources there for you, which you might want to take a look at in case there's a question that comes up on that. I hope that you again have a fabulous week. I have enjoyed communicating with a couple of you by phone and email about some different things, and it's kind of fun for me to get to talk to you a little bit and know more about you. I'm really here to help you, and I hope you don't feel that that you can't reach out, because I want you to. The whole thing with me and texting is that I just don't look at my phone through the day. I'm not attached to it like a lot of people. I didn't grow up with a cell phone, so I kind of put it in my purse and it's there. So if you really need to get a hold of me, and you call me, because I might hear it ring, and then at least I can take your call right away. But I don't do well with writing lengthy texts, which is why I suggest email too. But I am available for phone calls. Just don't call me after 9 o'clock at night, because I go to bed early and I get up early. Thank you again for your attention and for being an active participant in this class. I'm really enjoying it, and I hope again that you're getting something worthwhile out of it. Have a great week.